Hey everybody, Sam Gadget Guy here, and we're finally wrapping up our long-term review on the Samsung Gear S smartwatch. Now, I've been using this puppy for the better part of a month as my smartwatch daily driver, and it's time to report back my findings on Samsung's attempt at bolting a smartphone to your wrist. Now, this is not a small watch. Getting into some size comparisons, here's the Gear S next to the LG G Watch R. Also get a sense of how thick these things are. Another watch with a curved screen is the Asus ZenWatch, but you can see the Gear S has a much more dramatic curve to its display than Asus was able to pack into their smartwatch. Here's the Gear S next to one of my very first smartwatches, the Martian Passport. Samsung's offering here looks like an absolute monster next to an original Pebble, the plastic Pebble. Here's the Gear S next to one of my all-time faves, the Qualcomm Talk. Very similar in terms of aesthetic, overall design. We're going to talk about build quality and design in just a bit. Lastly, so you can see how the Gear S compares to other watches in Samsung's lineup, here's the Gear S next to the Gear 2. You can see they're about the same thickness, the same overall girth, but that curve definitely helps the Gear S feel a little bit sleeker on the wrist, even though it's dealing with a much larger screen. Now, walking around the hardware on the watch, you're going to notice right away this very impressive display. This display is actually a slightly higher resolution than the very first iPhone, shrunk down to a 2-inch diagonal. And it is a really gorgeous AMOLED display. I still have issues with smartwatches using LCDs and AMOLEDs though, in that it still is easy to wash out this display in direct sunlight. At the bottom of the watch display, we've got the home button, which turns the screen on, takes you back to your main clock face, and then right next to that, we've got a little ambient light sensor so that the screen's brightness can be adjusted automatically. It's a very handy touch. Moving to the bottom of the watch band, Samsung has done a terrific job in fixing this clasp. This is one of my complaints with the original Gear, in that it's hard to pop this open, and it's hard to find a feel for how it snaps closed. It's almost like you have to push and grind them against each other just to get that little snap action going. Whereas on the Gear S, they've definitely done a better job of addressing this, where it's a lighter push to get them snapped together, and then you've just got a little bit more of an edge to get your thumb or a finger to pop it back open. And this watch strap is adjustable by these little pegs. I like this system, especially as this is not going to be an easy to replace watch band. Unlike the Gear 2, which uses a standard 22mm watch strap with these quick release pins, the strap on the Gear S wraps all the way around the watch face. So I was really hoping at some point we might see either a standardized watch strap connector or just replacement bands from Samsung so that you could have different experiences, like if you wanted a metal watch band or just a nicer rubber texture. I don't like the smooth texture on the Gear S band as much as I like this dimpled texture on the Gear 2. On the right side of the watch face, towards the bottom of the watch screen, we've got a little microphone port right there, which makes sense, as if you were talking into your watch with it strapped to your wrist, you'd probably be talking into the bottom of the watch. And on the opposite side of the screen, we've got the speaker vents for if you want to use this as a speakerphone on your wrist. I'm not a huge fan of that feature, but people seem to enjoy it, so manufacturers like Samsung are going to continue supporting it. Removing the watch strap, we can get a better view of the bottom here. We do have pogo pins to charge. We're going to talk about the charge cradle here in just a bit. I've always been impressed with the Gear line's ability to track things like heart rate. I think out of all of the smartwatches, it's actually one of the better systems for fitness people out there. If you're not looking at a dedicated fitness tracking solution, you're looking at a more all-rounder smartwatch. I believe if you're on Sprint or Verizon, you don't have access to the SIM card door, as that's a CDMA technology as opposed to the GSM technology built into the AT&T variant. Someone please correct me down in the comments if I'm totally wrong about that. Actually, removing the watch strap, I would love to take this thing back in time and convince someone who maybe owned like a Palm Pilot or a Windows Mobile PDA that this is the future of what personal data assistants were going to look like. All in all, it's a fine piece of tech, but it does wear a little bit more like a gadget and a bracelet than it does a watch. As some of the primary killer app features for this watch are being able to use it without your phone immediately within the vicinity of Bluetooth, it kind of makes sense that Samsung would go for a sportier build. I would absolutely love an adapter for this rubber ring around the screen, which would then terminate into a proper 22mm watch band strap so that we could add our own straps or just steal the one from the Gear 2. Now, getting into the function and software on this watch, it does respond to wrist gestures, like a little flick of the wrist will activate the screen. I find that this really works the best when you're trying to enjoy movie theater popcorn. But the Gear does attain its battery life through mostly leaving the screen off, and you do kind of need to depend on those gestures or to button presses to get into information on the screen so that you can see what time it is. And they have a number of different watch faces. Pressing this button is going to get you back to your main watch face. A swipe from the top is going to give us control over our speaker and our brightness. And you can set it to auto brightness for this little ambient light sensor. And then we also have a do not disturb mode in there as well if we don't want this watch to be vibrating or sending tons of alerts. A swipe from left to right is gonna get us into our notifications, and you guys have heard me complain about this on Android Wear, but I love having a one-stop resource, a catalog of all of the different alerts and notifications that have happened on my phone. So if I clear out these Twitter notifications, they're still gonna show up on my phone so that I can remember to deal with those notifications on my phone. Now, that's just going to be a personal preference in how you like to organize what information is being sent to which device and how you like to be notified for things. But I like to be aware of what's happening, but I hate that when I go to my phone, all of that stuff's been cleared out, so I don't remember, well, did I have a Google Plus notification? Did something happen on Tumblr? What was going on Sue? And continuing to swipe will give us individual text notifications on everything that we've gone through. So we can get even more information, and tapping on one of these, we can send this notification directly to our phone, light up our phone screen. Swiping from right to left on the screen are gonna give us little Samsung applets. Use the Samsung Music Player. I hate the Samsung Music Player, I really do. I like Google Play better. Here's our S Health stuff where we can see our steps, what kind of exercise, our heart rate. We've got a news feed that you can kind of scan through top news stories on your wrist. I don't actually use stuff like this very much at all. I can very quickly get to my itinerary and see what's going on my calendar, which is a couple side swipes. And then I can add individual little applets to the end of that list. Like if I want to have the current weather, if I want to get rid of the Samsung Music Player or the news brief, this is where I can organize which little applets are available through a right to left swipe. And then swiping up from the bottom is where we have a full list of apps that are installed on this watch. And there's actually quite a bit of stuff that you can do. And so the Yelp app, for example, serves up a tremendous amount of info in a very smartphone-like way. And once it gets your location, your information, you can quickly scan through stuff around you. Like if I wanna find, let's say this Indian place. It's got $2 signs, I can find directions right away. I've got a phone number that I can call directly from the watch. And then I can scroll down and go right to reviews. Now this is smooth enough and fast enough that it's right on the cusp of being something that I might prefer to do from my watch. And at any given point, a swipe from the top of the screen is the universal back button for the Gear S. You can always get back to where you were or to go back through an app. So like you go 2 or 3 pages deep into an app, you swipe from the top of the screen and it'll take you backwards. The one thing that I found was kind of tricky about that is on my notifications list. So let's say I've got a ton of notifications and I scroll down to the bottom. If I'm not careful in how I scroll back up, I'll actually activate the back button. I find that I do prefer this layout over Android Wear's solution of focusing mostly on voice actions, because I think it's a little harder to organize the apps that run on your watch when you're constantly sliding through menus on Android Wear, and they're very easily accessed here on the Gear S with a simple swipe from your home screen. Getting into the Gear software that's installed on your phone, first of all, I've seen a number of reviews on the Gear S, which is trying to make this thing sound like it's a wholly separate device, it's a wholly separate gadget. It is a smartwatch, which is an extension of the services which live on your smartphone. The Samsung Gear app has improved tremendously in giving you just tools and customization options. The home screen styler, if we want to change up what wallpapers we're using on your Gear S. We can get into file transfers. Now this is really exciting for me because Android Wear has a process in which you can load music files directly to your Android Wear smartwatches, but it's kind of a complicated, not very transparent process. Whereas on the Gear software, we have a file manager. You just want to locate music files, you can send them directly to your watch, pair your watch with a Bluetooth headset, and then listen to music directly from your watch and not have to worry about using your phone all the time. Especially handy for those people who like to work out. And if you're like me, you sweat a lot, you probably don't want to sweat all over your Galaxy Note, you probably just want to sweat on your watch, which is IP67 rated. But even for silly things, like if you want to send some image files over to your watch, always have pictures of your wife or your kids or your pets. It's a very simple process to select files, ship them directly over to the watch over Bluetooth. For example, I can fire up my watch. I've already moved a couple files over. Apparently, the Gear S doesn't have stylus support. Who knew? We can go into the gallery. You can go and see photos that have been moved directly over, and it's got a pretty decent amount of support for different image files like JPEGs and PNGs. But you know, there's a little pink flower right there. There's some cherry blossoms. Again, the screen resolution is nice enough that this isn't a terrible experience moving these photos over, especially for those times like, oh hey, do you have a picture of your dog? You want to show someone a picture of your dog. Here's an image of some coffee grounds with salt. That's my favorite way to make a cup of coffee, is throwing salt in coffee. And it's just a really handy way knowing that you've got this built-in file manager in the Gear app, and you don't have to mess around with other crazy. It's a lot handier than what you have to go through on pretty much any other watch that I've used. And going through the rest of the Gear app, of course, we've got settings for S Health just to keep track of all of our fitness. I actually think S Health does a slightly better job than Android's Fit solution for managing my health and fitness routines. We do have settings for notifications. It's just a really handy way just to make sure that you're keeping your watch, you're using your watch as the gatekeeper for what alerts are coming through from your phone to your wrist. For expanding what the Gear can do, we do have the Gear App Store. And like I said before, like playing with some of the apps on this thing, there is a surprising amount of stuff being developed for the Gear, especially that the Gear handles apps just a little bit more like a smartphone does. You've got YouTube players, you've got a variety of different fitness trackers, Runtastic, Endomondo, Decado, GuruWear. I actually have not played with Samsung Milk. I don't know if anyone out there is using Samsung Milk. Let me know if you enjoy that service. I'm more of a Spotify, Pandora, Google Play. We can fire up the Opera Mini browser if we want a dedicated web browser on our wrist. I think that's kind of ridiculous. It's not what I like about smartwatches, but if that's a killer service for you, then I would highly recommend doing it. As I mentioned before, that Yelp app just really on the border's edge for me of what's usable from your wrist versus what's easier to do on your phone. And then just a number of crazy other things too. You want to scan through your Instagram feed, you can do that. And that actually makes a lot of sense with having sort of square photos pop up, double tap on the screen to like other people's photos, keep track of what's going on there. And then we get into the Gear Essentials, and this is where I think smartwatches actually shine. When you think about what a watch is a very simple delivery mechanism for tiny little pieces of information like the time. So when you can streamline a process, it makes a lot of sense when you're using it from the smaller screen. Firing up a calculator. You need to do some really basic arithmetic, you can do that from your watch. If you need to do something just a little bit more advanced than, adding or subtracting or multiplying two numbers together, you probably want to pull your phone out. You want to calculate a tip, you can very quickly do that from your watch. So getting out of there and going into something like a stopwatch, a very simple and streamlined way to track the passage of time directly from your wrist. You can hit the lap, go through a couple different laps, stop it, reset it, clear it, swipe back, and you're back into your list of applets. Ditto something like a compass, a very easy service to bolt onto your wrist. I don't know if you're into hiking or camping, but if you're one of those outdoorsy type folks, it's really nice just being able to track where north is. So while you can do a bunch of really cool phone-like things, you can pull up a keyboard and type messages and stuff from your watch, it's actually these little applets that I think do an amazing job of expanding the conversation on what types of services we can feed to our wrist and actually improve upon what we would normally do from our phones. We have the Find My Gear service, and I tap on this, and it's just going to fire up the watch and start having it make noise with the little speaker that's built into the watch. So I'm going to go ahead and activate it. So if you forgot where you put your smartwatch, it would start making little chirps at you. Now, for as critical as I am of putting phone services on a watch, one of the things that I actually did kind of like using was Here Maps. This is friggin' cool. I'm a big fan of Here Maps. I like that you can do locally saved map files, so you don't have to use your data connection for navigation services. And that it works well enough from a watch that it did make sense for me to continue using that service from my wrist. So I can scan through. You can see it's actually moving pretty quick. There's the 101 and the 405. Plus, I just think it's kind of cool to see this Nokia app really getting embraced by the rest of the Android environment. I think Here Maps is an excellent competitor to Google Maps. I do most of my turn-by-turn on Google Maps in Waze, but I really do like, especially when I'm visiting a different area or different location, to have offline maps just in case I don't know what's going to happen to my data plan. And I think it's a nice way to sort of tag team services between watch and phone. But of course, the killer app for the Gear S is that it has its own data connection. It has its own GSM signal on AT&T, its own CDMA signal on Sprint and Verizon, so that you can get data, phone calls, and alerts directly to your watch if you don't have a connection with your phone. So I'm going to turn off Bluetooth, and you're going to see that my Gear is going to freak out. Bluetooth has been disconnected. We're going to give it just another second. Your Gear is no longer connected to your mobile device via Bluetooth. Use mobile networks will be turned on automatically after approximately 60 seconds. So when the watch is not paired to your phone And after about a minute, it's going to switch over to its own data connection. And I don't have it hooked up on the Wi-Fi network here. It is going to go directly to AT&T's network. So if we go into settings and we go into call, this will give you the option on whether or not you want AT&T to handle, see, now I'm connected remotely. Your gear is no longer connected. Tap OK to turn on call forwarding. Great. So if we go into these settings, so what you can do is you can either have AT&T on the back end connect your cell phone number to your watch's phone number and have automatic call forwarding, or you can disable the automatic call forwarding and just treat the watch as if it were its own phone system. So it has its own dedicated phone number. You can call the watch directly if you would like, but I actually really like this pairing where they're monitoring what's happening on my phone and then they can send that information directly over to my watch. And so now my phone is notifying me that call forwarding has been automatically established. And one of the quirky things about this setup though is that I'm a Google Voice user and I do not get a lot of time to respond because of the way that Google Voice intercepts phone calls too. So the call comes in on my phone, I'm just gonna let it keep ringing, it's ringing, it's ringing. But then when I don't answer it from my phone, then it's going to send it to my watch. They don't happen simultaneously. So we get one big pulse, and that's about it. And that's largely a problem with Google Voice. So when that happened, the first time that happened, I was out and about. That really took me by surprise because I looked down, I was trying to see who it was that was calling, and I got that Google Voice number coming in, and I wasn't actually able to respond fast enough to answer the call from my wrist. So that's just something to be aware of in how this relationship goes when we're doing some really sophisticated call juggling between voice over IP services like Google Voice, then interacting with smartphone services on AT&T's network, and then AT&T is handling a really sophisticated back-end pairing to automatically forward calls between these two devices. Now, battery life has been pretty solid on the watch, though it does use that cheat of most of the time the screen is off. When connected over Bluetooth and using it mostly for smartwatchy stuff like notifications, and like I said, I do like using voice memos a lot, I can easily get 2 days of use out of the Gear S. As you start using that cell phone radio, however, that's going to radically reduce the amount of life that you can accomplish with this watch. And taking it out in the field on a really bright, busy day and not having it connected to my phone for pretty much the whole day, I was almost dead with this watch and into the low power saving mode at dinner time. Now, recharging the watch means using this little cradle guy here, which I was surprised at how fat this cradle was when I first pulled it out. You've got a little micro USB connector here, which glows blue when you have it connected to a power source. And I was getting all ready to pan it like, oh, what's Samsung doing with all this wasted plastic? Until I flipped it over and I read the back, and then I saw this little note right here, this lithium ion 350 milliamp hour. Well, that's very interesting. The charge cradle that Samsung has supplied with the Gear S also functions as a portable battery backup for your Gear S. And if the watch is used mostly over a Bluetooth connection, this is going to give you almost 4 days of runtime. If it's used mostly over its own data connection, then you're looking at just under 2 days of runtime. But I thought this was a really handy trick and really cool design on Samsung's part to address one of the concerns that we've had about smartwatches, namely battery life. Now, watch performance, menus, UI, I find that the entire experience is pretty snappy and quick, but trying to tap out messages, this is not really what I like about smart watches. I mean, it's one of those situations, if the choice is whether or not I can do it or not, then I'd rather have the ability to do it. But this tiny little keyboard is just, it requires so much tactile and visual attention. I mean, even just gesturing towards it, I accidentally hit it right there, that this isn't a very fun experience. And I just find myself not really engaging with services that require me to punch out messages on this tiny little keyboard. But really, my biggest criticism with the Gear S is that for a smartwatch, notifications on this thing are not very discreet. The triple pulse vibration that hits on your wrist, even when the vibrating motor is set to its weakest setting, is still loud enough for people to be distracted by that buzzing sound that's coming off my arm. Absolutely a nitpicky thing to criticize about this product, but that is my absolute favorite thing about wearing a smartwatch, and it really did make using the Gear S a little bit more difficult while out in public. So where does that leave us with the Gear S? I think this is an A very interesting experiment in where we might go with services and notifications on our wrists. Some services make more sense to use from a tablet. Some services make more sense to use from a phone, and we're starting to see little applets and little services that make more sense to use from some other type of screen, be they heads-up displays in our cars, eye-level displays built into glasses, or even just a smartwatch style experience. If you're looking for a way to leave your phone at home for short periods of time to go work out or to go tackle a hike, you don't want to worry about messing up your nice phone or getting it all gross and sweaty, this watch makes a lot of sense. Now, as for whether or not you want to invest in the Gear ecosystem or in the Android Wear ecosystem, that's going to be a bit more of a personal preference. I think Android Wear does a better job of tying into that Google Now experience. If you're a big fan of Google Now, I would say definitely go check out Android Wear. The Gear might not be the better fit for you. But if you're a big Samsung fan and you really want to get into expanding on the role of smartwatches, you really want to get into more data-centric and phone-style applets that can be run from your wrist, or you're even curious about maybe what an Apple Watch solution might bring to the table, I think Samsung's third generation of watch here is going to be a more refined experience than what we'll get out of Android Wear or the Apple Watch. And folks, right now I think AT&T actually does have one of the better deals on the Gear S. You can shop it $199 on contract, $299 off contract. I think Verizon, that's probably going to be about $50 more on both sides, $350 for the Gear S if you're shopping it on Big Red. I'll of course leave some links down below this video where you can get more information on the Gear S, maybe shop it online. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos and reviews like these, and I would not be able to continue producing on this channel if you all weren't out there sharing my videos on social sites like Reddit and Facebook and Twitter and Google+. So keep bringing more cool people to the party. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next review.